Cabinda is a curious and interesting place I might otherwise have missed. Formerly known as Portuguese Congo, and no larger than the city of London, Cabinda is a curious little region sandwiched between the Republic of the Congo and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Having endured more than 30-year-long struggle to claim independence from the rest of Angola, it likely may become one of the next world's newest countries, give or take a few years, decades. A brief history of Cabinda. You will have heard of French Congo and Belgian Congo today, known as Congo-Brazzaville and Congo-Kinshasa, or DRC, respectively. Back in colonial days, there was also a Portuguese Congo. Had it gained independence like the other two, it might have been called Congo Cabinda today. Cabinda, the Kuwait of Africa. Perhaps an independent Cabinda will become a reality one day, but I'm afraid I'm not overly optimistic on Cabinda's behalf. Why? Oil, that's why. Angola is a rich country. Rich in natural resources, that is, including oil. 60% of that oil, a whopping 700,000 barrels of crude per day, are hoisted up from some of the largest offshore oil fields in the world right here off the coast of Cabinda. Bad enough to have to give up territory, let alone petroleum reserves. As a result, Cabindan's activists are arbitrarily arrested and detained. On top of that, international oil companies want a piece of the action, as well. American petroleum player Chevron is especially busy exploiting the oil fields here. Et voila, we have a new Kuwait. Africa's Kuwait. Another source of wealth in Cabinda is gold. With all those riches provided by nature, one could by rights expect Angola to be a good place to live for all its citizens. But sadly, the wealth is not exactly equally distributed. Almost half of Angola's population lives in dire poverty, less than $1.90 a day. Getting to Cabinda. The most common way to enter Cabinda is with TAAG Angola Airlines from Luanda. There are 3 daily flights each way, taking about 45 minutes. It is also possible to take the overnight ferry from Luanda, 12 hours, with 2 meals included in the ticket price. As for sleeping, you will just have to find a spot on the floor along with everyone else. Finally, you can go by land, though that option is not recommended at present, due to political unrest. Besides, getting a visa for the DRC, even just for transit, is no picnic. With time restraints, a flight is the best option to travel to Cabinda. The city, Cabinda's capital, is also called Cabinda. Carnival in Cabinda. Music and dance traditions have been passed down through generations in the various ethnic groups, and we get to see all that rhythm and energy in delightful action. The lively carnival parade in Angola's capital. Luanda's carnival started at 4 p.m. African time, i.e. 5:30 p.m., but the parade here in Cabinda begins promptly at 10 a.m. Cabinda, African beat, colorful clothes, painted faces, and dancing. Lots of dancing. What else can you experience in Cabinda? It's a pretty diverse region, Cabinda. Within the 7,280 square kilometers, bigger than Brunei but smaller than Puerto Rico, it contains some pretty lush landscapes, visible now at the end of the rainy season. The climate is tropical, the Atlantic beaches are golden and gorgeous, the rainforest is verdant, and there are gorillas. Western lowland gorillas, or their fascinating scientific name, gorilla. Things to do in Cabinda. I have mentioned the historic cemetery and the carnival. Here are further things to see and do in Cabinda: Landana Beach, a collapsed church in Landana, and memories of humanity's tragic past. Along the Chiloango River in the Mayom Forest. The Landana Beach is today a favorite spot for swimming, fishing and all sorts of marine fun. Even more interesting, to me, at least, it's also a nesting spot for sea turtles. Sometimes, you can see baby turtles hatching and wander down to the ocean here. But see the pier here, or what is left of it. Once, in a not too distant past, enslaved people were shipped off from this pier, to cross the Atlantic, never to see their home again. Near Landana Beach is the old church São Tiago Major, which collapsed in 2018, after heavy rainfall. Myom Forest Reserve. The Myom Forest is part of the Myom Forest Reserve, a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, near the DRC border. This is one of the largest tropical forests in Africa, with flora and fauna in abundance, including 50-meter-tall trees, rare birds, elephants, chimpanzees, and gorilla. Praça de São Pedro Market. Back in the city of Cabinda, the lively Praça de São Pedro Market. There is a large Congolese population in Cabinda, and many of the vendors there are from DRC. Interesting to hear French spoken as we walk through the market. The Pope in the park. Also in the city is Catholic Mission, Cabinda's Catholic Church, presently under renovation, and across the street is a sculpture garden where João Paulo II has pride of place, surrounded by various other Catholic big shots. Pope John Paul visited Cabinda in 1992. Border spotting. Our driver asks if we want to go south to Yema, to the border with the DRC. Of course we did. There is over there a neutral territory. We're allowed to take photos towards Cabinda, but not DRC. The secret Bakama ceremony. Finally, I'll mention something I did experience myself, as it is rare, and, as I understand it, difficult to get permission to witness, a Bakama ceremony. The Bakama is a secret organization, considered to be an intermediary between us humans and the spirits of the ancestors. They wear banana leaves and face masks, and appear in specific ceremonies, such as funerals of the rich and influential, or when the highest officials visit Cabinda, or there are important meetings where the powerful people settle matters of values and morals. The Bakama is said to have the power to curse. Cabinda's version of voodoo, it sounds. It is classified as national cultural heritage. Portuguese colonialism. Portugal gradually blended Cabinda and Angola into a single colony. When the end of the Salazar dictatorship in Portugal meant the country's withdrawal from African colonies, Cabinda was declared part of a newly independent Angola in 1975. In 2010, Cabinda drew world media attention following an attack on the Togo football team on its way to the Africa Cup of Nations in Angola. The attackers were members of the Front for the Liberation of the Enclave of Cabinda, FLEC, a small group that fights for Cabindan independence from Angola. Despite 60 years of fighting between the FLEC armed branch and the Angolan armed forces, the Cabinda enclave remains. Human Rights Watch has documented grave human rights violations from both the FLEC and the Angolan armed forces, leading thousands of people to flee to neighboring countries. Yet, the exclave has not received significant international press coverage even after the tragic 2010 attack. No one wants to jeopardize their relationship with Angola while continuing to benefit from the vast oil resources in Cabinda. The oil profit made from this little territory is huge, and yet, the Cabindan population lives in poor conditions, compared to the rest of Angola. A historical fight over a tiny strip of land. Cabinda is geographically separated from the country of Angola and has over 900,000 inhabitants. During the 15th century, Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French settlers arrived in this territory. In 1885, Cabinda became a Portuguese protectorate, which is a province with a quasi-autonomous status. Angola, on the other hand, received the status of colony, where Portuguese settlers exercised political power. In 1956, Cabinda lost its autonomy when Portugal merged both the Cabinda and Angolan administrations. Several protest movements emerged over the years, then became the FLEC in 1963. Together, they created an exiled government based in the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC. In 1974, a military coup in Portugal enabled the colonies to pursue independence. A year later, the Angolan main political parties, excluding the FLEC, signed the Alva Agreement to put an end to the 13-year-long independence conflict against the Portuguese settlers, and annexed Cabinda. Over the years, Cabinda's separatist voices have consistently asserted their autonomy with the FLEC at the forefront. The organization has experienced several internal splits, and certain branches have even conducted guerrilla actions. In 2006, the Angolan government signed a peace agreement with a FLEC sub-branch. Yet, the lack of consultation with the rest of the movement led to legal action and the intensification of guerrilla activities. In recent history, the FLEC and the Cabinda civil society have attempted to reopen peace talks with Luanda, Angola's capital city, but such calls have been left unanswered. Why does this little strip of land provoke so much envy? In 1954, offshore oil fields were discovered and started to be exploited. Since then, the oil industry has flourished in Cabinda, making Angola Africa's second-largest oil-producing country. Cabinda's oil represented a large majority of the Angola earnings. The main business sector of Cabinda seems to not have benefited the local population for a long time. One of the FLEC's demands is for better management and access to oil resources which are de facto indigenous to Cabinda. The contrast between the huge profit of these oil fields heavily guarded by Angolan soldiers and the poor living conditions in Cabinda is striking. For the same position, the salary in Cabinda is 2 or 3 times lower than the salary in Angola. With a high unemployment rate, there are serious needs for new infrastructure and investments to address malnutrition due to the lack of adequate agricultural, social, and educational policies, amidst progressive restrictions on civil rights. What future for the independentists? The Cabinda struggle is largely absent from mainstream media, as the international community avoids criticizing Angola due to its lucrative oil fields. Although Cabinda has brought in oil money for a long time, today it is one of the biggest hubs for misappropriation of funds. The separatist movement is stuck in a complicated situation. Keeping the status quo would only fuel more violence. Yet, the current state of the Angolan democracy, with deeply rooted corruption and restricted civil liberties, makes it difficult to explore other options to redefine the status of Cabinda. As long as the guerrilla actions do not impact the oil business, the Angolan government will not take any further steps towards peace talks. The government should understand that Cabinda will remain a burden and a source of instability as long as dialogue is not open. Angola has the means to deal with this problem, first by reducing its reliance on Cabinda oil. Some Cabinda expatriates take part in awareness raising around this enclave. For instance, the footballer Eduardo Camavinga, who was born in Cabinda, published a biography, coming back to the history of his family in the enclave. The history of Cabinda must be shared so that its people are heard, especially when the oil industry leads states and corporations to turn a blind eye.